She is a trailblazer. If you don't know her already, she is just incredible, not just in Kosovo, but all around the world. She's an inspirational role model as a lawyer, the first female speaker of the Assembly, and the country's second female president in 15 years. So the United States, we should be paying attention. You have a lot to teach us. Okay, and then she does all this, most importantly, as a mom of 2 beautiful twin girls. So I don't know how you do that. We need to talk afterwards about how that actually happens. She's held a number of important positions in Kosovo, but perhaps none as pivotal as her leadership on the team before the International Court of Justice regarding the Declaration of Kosovo back in 1998. Madam President, it's such a singular honor to have you here. Thank you for kicking off GEM 23.
Thank you so much, Fatma. The honor is all mine. And of course, very much honored to be here with our distinguished delegation. Good morning, everyone. A great pleasure to be back at Harvard after so many years. When I first visited at that time as the chief of staff to the president and was in the delegation of another president. Dear faculty directors, deans, faculty members, researchers, students, civil society representatives, philanthropes, climate activists, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen. In the words of marine biologist Sylvia Earle and former Harvard Research Fellow, the natural world is a gift that we depend on. And when we nurture it, it nurtures us in return. The challenges that we all face in preserving our environment are great, but the stakes are even greater. We must act now to protect the planet that we all call home. This responsibility falls on all of us, individually as well as collectively. We all have a responsibility to safeguard the natural resources that sustain us and to ensure that they remain viable for future generations. I am therefore delighted to be here with all of you at this conference that puts the well-being of our planet at the center of attention. I'm particularly pleased to come here and be among friends and personalities who believe that a better, a brighter, a greener, and more sustainable future for all is actually possible. But to get here, we need to work together. We need to do so much. We need to do it now and do it every single day. Because when speaking of climate change, there should be no pause button every single time that another challenge emerges. We must engage in accelerated action. Climate change truly is a global emergency. Climate action here and now, should be the legacy of our generation. I'm here today representing my people and sharing a part of the story of the Republic of Kosovo. We are indeed a small country, a very small country. And our greenhouse gas emissions are not even closely comparable to those of the United States or the global big economies. But that should not put us at ease. Whether you come from a big or a small country, this is not a job that should be left to others. If we want to save our lives and our planet, then you're exactly the kind of person we need right now. We need to do this ourselves, each and every one of us, no matter where we come from. However, we must also recognize the ingrained inequities to tackle the already serious consequences of climate change, to facilitate the clean energy transition, to enable the transfer of knowledge and technology, to finance and support climate action. The smaller countries will need the help of the larger nations. By extending a helping hand to the ones in need, to all of us, the greater countries will also end up helping themselves. Back in 2015, global leaders sent shockwaves of hope from Paris to all parts around the world. While a lot of things were dividing people and nations, climate change brought us all together. We witnessed, for the very first time, leaders from all parts of the world committing to working together to face what is now widely known as the single biggest threat facing humanity. The Paris Agreement was our way to tell our planet that we are willing to make up for our uncontrolled actions and the unknown and sometimes known consequences throughout history. It was a confirmation of the readiness to join the battle to jointly save our planet. It feels like a lot has happened since then. And indeed, many more meetings have taken place since then. World leaders have continued to meet in Marrakesh, in Bonn, in Katowice, in Madrid, in Glasgow, and just last year in Sharm el-Sheikh. We have moved from the Marrakesh implementation COP to commitment to reduce methane emissions by 30% by 2030, to promising to stop and reverse deforestation by the end of 2030, and lastly, putting climate losses and damages on the joint agenda in Egypt, with numerous countries pledging varying amounts of financial support for countries struggling with climate effects. The world indeed has made significant strides, yet our ambition is slower than the pace of the advancement of climate change. Almost 8 years on, we are regularly being warned of reaching a tipping point beyond which the cost damages could potentially become irreversible. The International Panel on Climate Change is where we turn to when we want to understand how far we have all reached. Their warnings are becoming more and more serious by the day. We are set to experience temperatures rising to 2.8 degrees by the end of the century if we stick to present policies. Meanwhile, IPCC's message is strikingly clear. Breaching 1.5 degrees, even temporarily, could be catastrophic. We cannot afford to let our common goal of limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees slip away. Images of natural disasters, reportings of rising sea levels, evidence of hottest days on Earth ever, devastating wildfires, increasing droughts, intensive storms, and destroyed crops are slowly turning into everyday realities. Whether in Spain or in Chad, in Nigeria or the Caribbean, in the Western Balkans or the mountainous regions of the Himalayas, challenges faced and caused by climate change are rising rapidly. Too many around the world. For too many of them, the concept of climate change is still distant. It is also vague. But the kids who had to miss school because of schools being burned down as a result of destructive wildfires, the desperate farmers that just experienced a crop season gone bad, the families that had to leave their homes because of the devastating floods, the neighbor that had to spend her lifetime savings in hope to find a cure for her respiratory disease. These people, our people, and their experiences are a stark reminder of what climate change means for our everyday lives. And what are these everyday threats? These people might not be able to find all the right words to define climate change specifically and scientifically, but one needs not to be a scientist to understand how climate change is affecting every one of our lives. Witnessing this, we have to be reminded that the Paris Agreement was just a starting point, not the culmination of our efforts. What was agreed there requires transformative thinking, innovative solutions, ambitious financial stimulus, and utterly determined political will. Ladies and gentlemen, we often hear the expression, climate change knows no borders. Time and again, we are being faced with this reality. It is therefore high time that also representation at the table, the support, the financial help becomes borderless as well. Some people have referred to issues like the pandemics, climate change, immigration, etc. as problems without passports. And I couldn't agree more. This joint threat, climate change, affects the entire humanity. No matter the country where you live, no matter the sheer size of your country, no matter the passport that you carry. Nonetheless, more often than not, even those who are in charge of climate global policies and the ones leading the climate fight tend to forget about the borderless nature of the challenges that we're facing. Because we're not a UN member yet, Kosovo, as a result, is neither a party to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change nor a signatory party to the Paris Agreement, although we've unilaterally made those commitments applicable to our country. While this unjust reality left our country out of high-level discussions at annual COPs, it has never faded our commitment and dedication to doing our share of work. But leaving us out of the room has also meant leaving us out all of the financing instruments that could have helped my country cope with the challenges of climate change. Despite this limitation, we always found a way to be heard, as we're doing today. Yet this does not suffice. Inclusion, equality, and participation are absolute precondition for a successful battle against climate change. Because after all, it's not like climate change is going to come all the way to our border and then just skip over us. As we said, it truly knows no borders. Climate change knows no politics either, which is precisely why Kosovo needs a seat at the table. It is therefore the right time for Kosovo to be side by side other countries at COP28. Kosovo understands well the importance of playing an active role in this existential battle. Through the National Council for Climate Change, our institutions have joined forces to identify scenarios that help us make significant miles forward after day in our efforts to combat climate change. In line with the request of the Energy Community Secretariat, a body that facilitates compliance of our energy and climate laws with those of the European Union, Kosovo is now working towards finalization of its National Energy and Climate Plan 2025-2030. As we are searching for modalities to join the Paris Agreement, despite not being a UN member, we are aware that the necessity to create the adequate preconditions. Therefore, we are now in the process of finalizing the very first law on climate change in our country. I believe that the strongest alliances are based on common values. So while seeking to succeed in this major undertaking, alliances are what turned into a determining factor. Last year, in talks with a dear friend of Kosovo, Special Envoy John Kerry, we discussed the benefits of Kosovo joining the global methane pledge. I'm happy to report that as a result of the commitment that I've made in that meeting, our institutions and our exemplary partnership with the US, now Kosovo has officially joined the group of countries committing to curbing methane emissions, now largely considered as the single fastest and most effective way to limit warming. There is always space to do more. There is an absolute necessity to bring everyone on board. In 2021, my office joined forces with line ministries to contribute to reforestation through planting more than 1 million trees in 1 year. This all happened ahead of Glasgow COP26, whereas, as you know, more than 100 countries have promised to stop and reverse deforestation by the end of 2030. And we delivered. We engaged in this project because, just like in everything else in life, we are convinced that you lead best when you lead by example. And we won't stop at this. We are currently working with civil society organizations and international partners to bring to life the concept of urban forestry and green urban spaces. I believe that we all agree that a life spent surrounded by greenery is in fact a life lived in serenity. And as I speak of what my country is doing, I believe I also have to provide some more context to set a clearer picture for everyone. Being the 5th largest reserve of lignite in the world, naturally our energy system has historically been heavily dependent on lignite-based energy production. Unfortunately, that strong lignite dependence continues to this day. But we have now reached an inflection point. We are aware that decisions being made today have the power to frame our lives, our health, our economy, and the environment in the long run, the lives of our children and their future as well. We have chosen our path forward. That path consists of investments in renewable energy, in energy efficiency, and in the circular economy. Soon, we will be the host country of the biggest battery storage capacity project supported by the Millennium Challenge Corporation, as well as the first project in the Balkans for central heating through solar panels. But there is a potential for so much more, and there is certainly a lot of space for innovative projects and solutions. And this conference is the perfect opportunity to discuss some of the forms this could be done through partnerships that would ultimately enable technology and knowledge transfer. So we're looking forward to hearing and learning a lot from each and every one of you. So while the will to engage in a green transition to further empower the idea of a greener Kosovo is there, we all know that it takes way much more than that to actually win the case. An energy transition, a robust one as needed in Kosovo, comes with social costs, financial implications. It requires new policy playbooks and a community mindset that embraces the change. And as I said, a strong political will, which is there. But equally so, it creates vast amounts of new space for innovation, for technological solutions and transformative policy interventions. At the heart of all of this stands the need for support and guidance. At the country level, it requires cross-sectorial cooperation across policy, industry, energy, tech, finance, education, and entrepreneurship as well. And it lays down the foundations for new economic pathways. All of this, also having in mind gender equality and women empowerment. Whereas at the regional level, it requires good faith cooperation and policy coordination. At the international level, it asks for access to financing for all of us, and access to initiatives such as your Climate Incubation Fund. In the spirit of the objective of the Climate Incubation Fund, we will need support with bringing our climate activists from Kosovo together with global researchers to pursue evidence-driven solutions together. As said earlier, we have chosen our path, but we will need the support of people like you sitting here today to help us with identifying the most plausible solutions and finding the right answers to our everyday problem. You have your research, we have our local expertise, and a strong political will. A combination of these could set Kosovo on its path towards a net zero future by 2050, if not earlier. During the next hours, discussions will revolve around modalities to green emerging economies, how to build resilient societies, the intersection between climate, food security, and emerging technologies, the prospects of solar geoengineering, or how do we develop evidence-based disaster response. At the center of all these discussions, the focus is on designing fit-for-purpose platforms where research meets practice. But as it was said earlier, the real focus, in fact, is people. How do all of these affect the lives of our people for the better? In pursuing to do so, it is essential that we remember a couple of messages. First and foremost, there is no successful climate action without truth and data. Secondly, there's no successful climate action without education and awareness. Thirdly, there's no successful climate action without inclusion, equity, and gender equality. And finally, there is no successful climate action without partnerships, cooperation, and strong political will. Climate action needs to transcend business as usual and embrace transformative thinking. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, it's now become almost a standard practice to address the younger generation in climate change speeches, the ones that are still sitting in school benches that haven't arrived to Harvard yet. But this time I won't be doing that. And you'd wonder why. I actually said everything I said so far because I truly care about their future. I care about the future of my twin 9-year-olds and every single child of my country. I care about the future of every single child of the world. But if we want to succeed in protecting their future, climate change speeches should be first and foremost addressed to ourselves, our generation. We need to self-reflect and ultimately realize that it is us who have a chance to do something about it, because we have all the means and the knowledge at this most critical juncture. And if we are fully on board, then our kids, our youngsters, they will surely follow with appreciation, great engagement, and full cooperation. We should not leave all the burden to them. It's our job to make that change for them, and then they will follow. They are already leading with change, with or without us being part of it. Hence, let's make sure not to stand on their way with bad decisions. Inaction in the face of facts is unacceptable. And as my address comes to an end, I want to bring up an existential element for a genuinely successful climate action. President Zelensky said that climate change requires peace. I couldn't agree more. Indeed, there can be no effective, successful, or resilient climate policy without peace in our planet. But of course, never in the terms of autocrats, who are, by the way, are some of the people that are mostly contributing to the devastation of climate change. We are already witnessing firsthand how the global energy crisis is exacerbated by Russia's war, which, in addition to the significant devastation against the people of Ukraine, is also posing challenges to climate objectives and is restoring GHG emissions to historic peaks. In the face of ever-rising global tensions, cooperation between all of us, like-minded countries, seems sometimes harder to be achieved, but it should not be harder to be achieved. Climate change expects like-minded nations to work together to build resilient societies and a sustainable and greener future for all. Let's not forget that if we don't strive for climate action and climate justice here and now, climate-induced migration might very well be the next big cause of conflicts around the world. We have solutions, we have resources, we have the knowledge, we have the political will, and now we need the commitments, the action, as well as solidarity between one another. Climate change catastrophes cannot become a fact of life. Let's instead make climate action our generation's biggest victory. Thank you very much.
Bring up 2 chairs so we can do the conversation. I have a question for you. Okay. Well, that was incredible. Thank you so much for that conversation. Oops.
That's okay, no worries.
Thank you so much for that. And I wanted to just scene set for you because, you know, we have a lot of conversations here. We have a lot of conferences. We have a lot of events. We all know that. You've all been to them, right? You've all been to your fair share of conversations. I wanted to tell you, we have incredible people in the room. We have 42 countries watching this right now, all around the world. Actually, I'm going to tell you some of them because it is amazing. And I want to say that because I want to start with those of you who are watching around the world, not those who are in the room here today. Let me tell you a little bit about who's watching you right now as you're speaking. We have representation from Albania, Australia, Bangladesh, Bermuda, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Colombia, El Salvador, Ethiopia, France, Germany, the Holy See, India, Indonesia, Jordan, Kosovo, Mexico, Monaco, Montenegro, Namibia, Nepal, the Netherlands, Oman, Pakistan, Peru, Poland, Portugal, Korea, St. Kitts and Nevis. Thank you, St. Kitts and Nevis. I want to come. Senegal, Sierra Leone, Singapore, Somalia, South Africa, Spain, Uganda, the United Arab Emirates, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, the United States of America, and Venezuela. So first, thank you to all of you watching us right now online. And I wanted to start with this global audience. Yes, let's thank them, because that's incredible. So I'm going to start with a pretty provocative question, and I want to ask you a few questions, then we're going to turn it to our audience in the room. But you've been all around the world. You've had negotiations with every world leader. You've been in the room for tough conversations, negotiations, where you both have to master the art of diplomacy and getting to the deal, but also knowing that no one really understands what you're dealing with back home and the constraints you face domestically, right? And as a diplomat and as a head of state, I imagine that you are constantly trying to get the international deal while negotiating the art of a domestic deal back home that you can sell to your own population, and it has to work for your people. For countries that don't often have power at the table, that often are the underdogs in these negotiations, that often feel pressured when we think about climate finance, when we think about the terms and the conditions from the United States, from the EU, and even major philanthropists and others who are at the table, that can wield money or other resources as a way to get to the art of a deal on terms they think are the right terms, but may not work for the countries that they're working with. Maybe you've been in a similar situation. Can you help give advice to how do you actually help the world globally in ways that are sustainable for you politically, locally, and how smaller countries or countries that don't have what they perceive as equal power at the negotiation table on issues like climate, how do you think about that, and how do you navigate that balance?
First of all, everything that you said on the challenges that we face and finding a way to be heard are absolutely correct. But perhaps because Kosovo has a history of really striving to be heard since back from 1989 to 1999, we were victims of an apartheid-like regime that resulted in a genocidal war that the Milosevic regime exercised against the people of Kosovo. We have a very resilient spirit. We find a way to be heard. So no matter how small the country, we believe that we have an important voice and an extremely important story to tell. So we navigate around the room, we find friends, and then those friends help us to be able to tell our story, but also the details of the challenges that we're facing, which are very unique. And they are very unique to every single country, especially when we're talking about climate change. So we did experience a lot of these kind of occasions when, for example, because Kosovo, as I said, is not a UN member, you're not exactly invited to the main event, you're not in the main room, but we go there and we arrange meetings in the margins. So we make sure that almost every leader who participates in that big meeting in the room, we have bilaterals with those leaders. So they get to hear our story, it's just in a different room. So we do find a way to push our message through. What has helped us a lot is the partnerships that we've forged throughout the years. Primarily, I would say, our very existential and special relationship with the United States. The US does help us to make sure that these meetings take place, that the right messages are sent, and at the same time that we meet the right people who will be able to help us when it comes to climate change, but also other topics, I would say, from just gaining political and diplomatic support to gaining economic and financial support for the projects that we're pushing through. Now, how do we get things done in a way that they are internationally supported but also domestically supported? I would say the key has been, I've been in politics for the past 2 decades to learn this. The key is the trust of the people in the institutions. Right now in Kosovo, we have the highest trust towards the institutions in our parliamentary history. And we've been 2 years in the office and it's not going down. We're very blessed. It's actually going up. And in that sense, it makes it easier to be able to explain to people by simply being honest with them. You have to be very honest with them to tell them where the challenge lies, that it's going to have financial costs, that you're doing your best to protect your country's interests, their health, and their interests as citizens, and that you're partnering with Kosovo's best friends to make it happen. And when they trust you, then passing decisions through parliament, making sure that they are implemented through government decisions and presidential decrees becomes a little easier. So I would say honesty with the citizens, and secondly, full honesty with your partners. You should not raise expectations on things that are not deliverables for you back home. You need to tell them the reality that you're truly facing, which in our case is quite a large dependency on lignite. And of course, while we are aggressively investing in renewables, you need a plan. You can't just say, okay, today I'm going to lock everything. So on one side, we need to work and convince, of course, also a number of large companies into supporting us when it comes to the newest technologies of dealing with what we have in Kosovo, which is coal, but at the same time to make sure that we get the necessary support for this, what I call aggressive, but in the positive sense, investment in renewables. We've been around the world to look at what has worked best, even for very small countries, even for countries that are not that rich, even for countries that really need a just transition, because you need your people to be able to afford energy prices after investing in renewables. So I would say just resilience in making sure that you find a way to get your message across, even if you're not in the room, even if you're a small country. We have been able to find that way to be heard. But I have to say, so far in terms of financing, we still need to find a technical way how to get the financial support. If we're not formally a member of the UN, many of the things become quite impossible to get that support. But we do get individual support from the United States. And then the EU has been giving some help, but it needs to grow. It's too little compared to the needs in our region as such, but especially compared to the needs that Kosovo has in terms of the just transition that is needed. So we sometimes people are surprised when they see, let's say, all Latin American countries convening for a meeting, and then there's this president of Kosovo showing up to talk to them, or countries of the Pacific talking about climate change, and all of a sudden the president of Kosovo finds a way to join them to talk about how we can join forces. It's also about effective diplomacy, of course, but we'd love to partner with all of the countries watching and those not watching, but we'll make sure that they listen afterwards. So.
Well, I mean, there is a power of showing up. There's a power of people and connections. We're here at Harvard University. We're here at one of the greatest academic institutions in the world. We have incredible leaders, including in Harvard's leadership. I want to acknowledge Mark Elliott, who's here, who's our Vice Provost for International Affairs. Mark, thank you for being here with us. Mark, can I put you on the spot for a second?
Kennedy School.
Mark runs this incredible portfolio across Harvard around how to think about our role in international engagement and what we can be doing. What advice do you have for the international provost, for the vice provost for international affairs, on how you talked about the pause button and how we can't be on the pause button? So, okay, and I don't know technology really well. I know this is a weakness of mine. That button on the remote that you hit ×4, ×8, how do you get it to ×16? At a place like Harvard, when we think about our engagement with the world and international affairs, what advice, how should we be thinking about our role to support countries like Kosovo, but all of our partners in the world on equal terms?
I would, not that I feel particularly in the position to give you advice. It's just perhaps rather than an advice would be more of a plea for more support. I would ask everyone to have inclusiveness in mind in every single project. No matter how small a country is, there is enormous potential, especially among youth. There is so much talent there. that needs to be appreciated but also used, because this should be seen climate change. But in fact, so many of the global challenges, whether we're talking about just peace or we're talking about how to protect the rules-based international order, or we're talking about gender equality, all of these are joint challenges that we can only meet if we work with one another. So the more that we work together, and the more you can look at countries, big or far, small or big, as partners, the better I believe it would be, and the results would be touching the lives of more people around the world, positively speaking. So I would say, as I said in my speech, just focus on how our biggest power is, in fact, in our partnerships. So that's...
Thank you. You raised gender. You had a 4-point plan that you left us with. I called it TEIP, Truth and Data, Education and Awareness, Inclusion, Equity, Gender, and Partnerships and Political Will. I want to hone in on number 3. When we talk about inclusion and gender, easy buzzwords. Everyone has a strategy for them, right? Which organization now doesn't have a gender plan, an inclusion plan, a diversity plan? Strategies are one thing. Really putting these things into action is a whole other ballgame. I want to just scene set for those of you who don't know the statistics in Kosovo, because context matters. When we worked back at the Millennium Challenge Corporation and with other partners you've had, it became really early on that whatever partnerships we were going to have on climate had to think from the front end about women and gender, not as just a component or just a project or, you know, a tagline. Kosovo's labor market has some of the worst gender disparities in the world. Only 13.9% of women in Kosovo were employed as of 2019, which is astonishing for a country that is classified by the World Bank as an upper middle income country. So I wanted to ask you, you know, the fact though that women, despite that, are such an incredible part of your private sector, of your informal economy, but also small-owned medium enterprises, right? Women-owned businesses already make up over 10% of active companies, and they're growing. And we can see that in the cafes, we can see that in the stores in Pristina and beyond. When you think about green growth, when you think about your new energy strategy, which was very long awaited, and congratulations for Parliament passing it, when we think about your massive transition ahead from coal, when you think about the battery storage opportunities that are coming up for Kosovo with the MCC grant, how do you help us think about what inclusive growth really means? You are in the presence of from every school, I think, here at Harvard, but all of our institutions and partners around the world. How do you build an inclusion on the front end of design for development programming around green growth and climate inclusion? How do we think about gender gaps, not as a challenge, but as an opportunity to start from zero and redesign? And how do we get women up here in these seats to actually lead from the front and not from behind on climate?
You're right. The strategies are a piece of paper, and the reality oftentimes is quite the opposite of what you actually read in those documents. For way too long, the inactivity rate among women when it comes to the labor market in Kosovo has been one of the highest in the world. These past 2 years, we have quite an improvement when it comes to employment of women and the percentage that you just mentioned. Nevertheless, it's absolutely not enough. It's not enough because it's also stupid for any country to leave out the potential of 50% of its population from its workforce. It's harmful for the economy, it's harmful for the future, except for the fact that it's not fair and it's not right. It's also a bad decision for your economic growth. For that reason, many of the policies that we have been adopting and implementing in these past 2 years are directed specifically at supporting the private sector into inducing more employment for women and youth, of course, but mostly focused at women. And we've been supporting and incentivizing these businesses as well as other institutions into employing women, and this has been working quite well so far. But at the same time, my office has been actively engaged in very important projects of women's economic empowerment. Because look, it's like a transformative cycle. You make sure that by giving a job, or of course, they get the job. We don't give them the job. They get the job because they deserve the job. But by creating an environment where women can find a job that is, of course, one with which they can also help the family, that means that they also send the kids to kindergarten, that they don't stay at home. When you send the kids to kindergarten, it automatically means with every additional year that they spend in the kindergarten, they are 40% more productive according to international indices in their adult life. When they become more productive, that means a better economy for the country. But also when the woman is economically powerful, that means she will not stay in a home when there is domestic violence. So it's like a transformative cycle of an entire society that affects so much more than just the woman who is getting the job. So by supporting their empowerment, you're supporting so many aspects of life as well. You're supporting the kids, you're supporting the next adults, you're supporting your economy, you're supporting women into not staying in a home that is domestically abusive to you, so you're fighting domestic violence as well. So it is transformative if you do that. So there are a number of projects that we're doing in order to make sure that they're not just there, and I would say they're not just at the table, but they are at the decision-making table. Having been in a political party for quite some time, I understand that there are a lot of tables there. They might seat you at one, but then at the end you have three men who leave that table, they go to another room, and they come back with the solution or the decision, and they just communicate it to the rest of the table where the women are sitting. So being part of the decisive table, that is what truly matters. I think in terms of politics, what has happened in Kosovo is quite transformative. The people of Kosovo made a woman the most voted person in the history of the country, and this shows you that the society is getting emancipated in terms of gender equality even quicker than political parties themselves, but also they are giving a message to political parties that they want women at the helm. And by this example, whether in the parliament, the government, the presidency, an example is set also for other sectors, from the energy sector to businesses in general. The third component of what we're doing is supporting energy education in the area of energy for women, for young women. One of the biggest things that I've insisted in our Millennium Challenge Corporation projects has been to make sure that energy education for women is an important aspect of everything that they grant and finance. And now it has become one of the top 3 priorities of the Millennium Challenge Corporation and everything that we're doing and investing in the energy sector, because we had a very little number of women that were involved in energy projects or that they were educated in this sector. So now we have a new group of leaders, mostly educated in the United States, who have come back to Kosovo, and they are leading the way into energy transformation in Kosovo. And by giving this example, of course, they are also inspiring so many young girls into getting into the world of fighting climate change, energy transition, and so much more than that. So it's just important to give women a chance, and when you do, they shine. From energy to arts to politics to whatever you want, to sports. And it just happens that in Kosovo, the only gold medalists that we have from the Olympics are all women. So it's not politics the only area where women really shine and succeed, and they have been showcasing it throughout their lives. Of course, there is still a lot that we have to do and so many challenges on the way. So we shouldn't feel content with the fact that we have these high positions in politics, we've been elected and supported by the people, unless we can use these positions to deal with the daily most acute problems that all of the women in Kosovo face, no matter whether they're employed or not. And these problems are immense, as they are, in fact, everywhere in the world, but that shouldn't make us feel comfortable just because it's happening elsewhere. We need to lead the way to make sure that gender equity is action, not just a strategy, not just a plan that a company or an institution has, but action, everyday action that we see.
I want to acknowledge we have leadership from the Millennium Challenge Corporation here. Thank you all for coming and for your leadership and helping design the gender components in the front end of the design, not the back end of how we program development dollars for clean energy and energy finance. Well, we have a lot of brilliant people in the room, so let's at it. Let's hear what's on your minds. Would love to hear questions from our audience here in the room. We have 2 mics that we're going to run somewhere. No, we don't have mics. We are going to talk loudly, and I will echo it into my mic. Oh, good, I got it right. Okay, good. Where would we like to start? And please introduce yourselves so our distinguished guest has some context of your question. Sorry, am I missing? Andrew? Oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Andrew, please.
It's great to have you here. I'm Andy Revkin, a journalist mostly. I've been writing about climate change since the 80s, so I'm a gray beard. I was wondering if countries like Kosovo that have the sustained dependence on coal can get a better voice in the international landscape if they kind of find themselves around the world and do what like the AOSIS did, the Alliance of Small Island States. Is there an alliance of persistently dependent developing economies already, or can that be some part of the conversation? This would be more of a sectoral power.
Not formally yet, but that actually is a great idea. We do cooperate with one another a lot. Mostly, I would say, with countries in our region, but also other countries in Europe. As you know, there are a lot of them that are still dependent on coal to some extent. There are different, of course, percentages. We work closely with one another, we support one another, and then we coordinate messages, as well as asks and pleas and requests towards our partners at large. For example, Germany has been a country that has gone through a lot of what we are going through right now. Of course, they haven't faced all of their challenges yet, as we know. Germany is a country that has been supporting Kosovo a lot when it comes to energy transition. But in terms of a formal initiative, we still don't have that, but that's, as I said, something that we would definitely look into and see how many nations around the world would be interested into joining forces, so that when we speak together, we speak with one voice. And obviously, as my experience shows, we are taken more seriously by others who can help out. And of course, people like you, journalists, can help a lot in making sure that our voice is heard by writing about our countries and the needs that we have and how this would affect the larger community of nations. Thank you.
In the back. Oh.
Microphone. Okay.
And after that, we got to have some women asking questions too. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
No. Keep going. Say. We have to be intentional about these things. I've learned over time.
I didn't see any other hands, so.
No.
So just maybe staying on the theme of the just energy transition and the topics about coal. So my name is Mikhail Nikomarov. I'm from Bushveld Energy in South Africa. So South Africa has a similar dependence on coal, both from a power generation and employment and GDP contribution. And you talked about how you're transitioning to cleaner energy, so getting cleaner electrons. How are you managing the impacts on employment that will eventually come, and on the GDP contribution from coal mining and that? So I would just be interested how you're doing that.
Well, so far it hasn't been a big problem, because I would say we're at quite the beginning of the process of just transition. And although we're doing it faster than perhaps some other countries have done it, we haven't seen those effects when it comes to employment yet. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't plan. So what we're doing is we're working with countries that have gone through similar experiences. And we're also getting advice from professionals of this area to understand how we can do the best that we can to create as many new jobs when it comes to the new green energy transition. There are, as you know, enormous possibilities when it comes to new jobs also with renewables. So we're doing the best that we can in that direction, so that at the end, when you look at how many you've lost and how many you've gained, there isn't a big disbalance there. At the same time, we're trying to, as I going back to the honesty with your people. We're trying to explain to the people that the high return in terms of investing in renewables doesn't necessarily come immediately when it comes to your, let's say, economy or new jobs. But the long-term investment and the long-term high return is so much bigger than just leaving your country as it is with the current investment that we have in the energy sector and with what we have when it comes to dependency on coal. And when I talk about the return, I also mean health of the population, because so many health problems are caused because of the air pollution that coal is causing in our country, and I would assume many other countries as well, that when you look at, of course, apart from the loss of lives, which is the most destructive consequence of it, but also how much you have to invest in terms of the health sector and the health policies because of the air pollution and in general the climate crisis. By investing in renewables, you need to think of course, the positive outcome that all that has in the economy, in the health of the population. And when you have a healthy population, obviously, you have much better chances in succeeding in economic growth. So we need to look at the bigger picture rather than just the number of jobs. And living in a country like Kosovo, and I assume that's the same everywhere, when you think about a good life, it's not just about having a job. It's about making sure that you have good health care. It's about making sure that you have a nice environment. It's about making sure that you have a place where you can go with your little kids. It's about making sure that you breathe an unpolluted air. All of this make a good life, not just your job. So that's why investing in renewables is so much more than just about the number of jobs. But of course, that's not unimportant. It's extremely important to make sure that we create enough jobs so that we do not contribute to the already quite high unemployment scale that we have in the country, although that is being battled constantly. And new jobs are being created, but just new jobs, it's not enough. Of course, we need to have good wages so that there is quality of life as well, not just a job that you get by, but quality of life. I hope that answers your question.
As you were talking about air pollution, well, one of the first things that came to mind was talking about dignity, right? As we think about strategies around climate, as we think about, and we're going to talk about this in the incubation rooms later this afternoon, and as you all go off to ideate and to incubate technical solutions, we have to really bring in dignity to that, because the quality of the life that we are creating for the next generation matters just as much. And thank you for reminding us of that. You talked about air pollution, and as you think about global challenges, so many countries around the world are facing this, certainly in South Asia, where this is being felt every single day. Tarun, I want to acknowledge Tarun Khanna, who is the faculty director of the Mittal Institute, and we're really grateful that they're partnering with us on our Climate Incubation Fund. And because these are the types of global challenges we really want to think through. We want to connect these types of lessons across from Europe to Asia to Latin America to Africa to beyond. So these are the types of things we're trying to really think through. We have time. I'm going to take 2 more questions, and I'll take them in a batch before we wrap up. Perfect. Angie and then Farhad.
Welcome to Harvard, Madam President. It's truly a pleasure for us to have you here. I am Angie. I am a graduate student here at Harvard, and I am a CID student ambassador. Hearing that Kosovo
From
has...
Ecuador, right?
Hearing that Kosovo has more than half of the population as youth, it is really empowering for me as a young person to hear that young people are also being engaged in this new wave of sustainability. And I want to hear a little bit more about what does Kosovo do in order to engage this new generation to continue this conversation towards sustainability, but also in going beyond to continue having action and tackling the root problem. And I really want to hear more about, what other countries learning from Kosovo can do to engage engage new and young generations.
Great. And we'll take, before we answer,
Sure.
if you don't mind, we'll take one more. Farhat?
Hi, it's so great to be here and to have you, madam. I'm Farhat Jalalboy. I lead strategy at Save the Children. We're the largest child's rights organization in the world. And as we have today people here from government, from the private sector, and from many other spheres, I just wanted to bring in the civil society, right, that's doing so much work in all of our countries around climate change. And I was wondering if you could just speak to the civil society in Kosovo and how they are tackling climate change and what that looks like. How do we partner better with governments, with academia, with others? Thank you.
Thank you. Shall I answer, or we're going to take another one?
I think Aisha had her hand up, since we're completing the.
Oh, sorry, I didn't
Sure.
see.
Congratulations, Madam President. Really, you make us really, really proud. I'm from Nigeria, and I'm the head of the Murtala Mohammed Foundation. We've been working with humanitarian disasters for a long time, and I'm sure you're very familiar with what's going on with Boko Haram in the northeast of Nigeria. Now, one of the things we can tell is that there's a clear link between climate change and climate disasters and extremism, particularly around the Lake Chad region. Most of you know that 30 million livelihoods are dependent on the Lake Chad. The Lake Chad has dried by almost 90%. So we're clear, there's no doubt about it. In the countries of Nigeria, Niger, Chad, and Cameroon, there's climate change. And so that's one problem. The other problem we have is that Nigeria is dependent on fossil fuels. And we've been talking extensively about this transition, but our governments are resistant to transition. They don't want to transition to clean energy. So we've got a situation, the argument is that there's grinding poverty. We don't have the luxury of talking about climate change. That is their argument. So it's almost as if we're caught in some kind of catch-22 situation, and I just would like to hear what you think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. So youth, civil society, and the complex issue of sometimes the lack of political will to not just discuss but also act on climate action. On youth, I would say what we've done is understand that small projects can have a big impact. There are so many small projects ongoing in Kosovo, mostly focused on kids and youth, so that little kids can understand how important it is to protect the environment around them, to protect the planet, to understand that this is their homes. Because it does start with education, just like everything else when it comes to the mentality, to the opinions that you have on certain issues. And schools have been quite extensively including environmental protection actions at the very early school ages. And what I really like is that teachers are becoming more and more aware of this. So even if it's not part of the curricula formally, they engage at least once a week, they engage into making sure that kids do something related to protecting the environment, whether it's making sure that they learn about very specific flowers that grow only in Kosovo and they get to see them and how important it is to protect them, to biodiversity, to issues that relate to, of course, reforestation and just making sure that they keep the environment clean. So all of this, and I would say, I mean, when I listen to my twin girls talking about environment every single time we go out on our walks, I had no clue about these issues in the past. It seemed normal. To them, it's not normal. If they see garbage around the park, it's not. For them, it's like, how can human beings destroy our joint home? And it's so important to hear little girls and little boys who are in their just very first grades of primary school talk about this. So I would say education at very early stages is key to keep them engaged. When we were talking about Earth Days, because we celebrate days, not just the Earth Day in Kosovo. One of the things that I did most was invite students from high schools especially, so that we can have discussions. It's amazing how much more knowledge that they have compared to me. Obviously not Learta, who's my energy expert. She knows so much more than everyone else. But when you listen to these students, how much they know about the very details of climate change and greenhouse emissions and all of this, it's amazing. So I would say education. Education is key at very early stages to make sure that the youth is in fact what leads the change and makes sure that there is continuous climate action. And you know, in Kosovo, 53%, as I said, are under 25. About 2/3 are under 37. So it's youth that leads everything, including the issues of climate change. They are leading all of the projects when it comes to environmental protection and so on in Kosovo. And that takes me to civil society. Practically everything in Kosovo until very recently that was done in the area of climate change and environment protection was civil society. Until late, they didn't feel like they had an open door to not just discuss, but also make sure that what they say becomes action. Now I believe that much of what they have been saying has become action through our new national energy strategy. Not all, obviously. There are still a lot of things that we're striving to make them part of our policy, decision making, but also everyday action. And we're going to work together with civil society. They have an existential role on this issue, and they also provide the expertise that was not there in the institutions until quite recently, and they still do. I work with civil society on my daily work on every single issue, to be frank, not just on climate change. Without involving them, I don't think we can ever make the right decisions for the country and for our people. And then getting back to what you pointed out when it comes to Nigeria, hoping to visit your country, by the way, soon. In poor societies, of course, this is a difficult path and a difficult decision, but it's the only path. There's no other path. Anything else takes you to further destruction, further securing a poor society rather than making sure that there is economic growth through sustainability. And economic growth and sustainability and environment should not be seen as separate topics any longer. We need to learn from emerging powers and how they have been doing both at the same time. They've been making sure that there is GDP growth while at the same time ensuring sustainability and protection of environment. It is possible, which is why we've insisted that in our economic development strategy, we don't have a separate development strategy from a sustainability or environment protection strategy. They are interconnected, so they should be one. That is one. Secondly, awareness is key, and I would say if politicians resist, we need to support civil society in making sure that the right message is sent to the people that this is about your health. This is about your life. This is about your kids' health. This is about preventing extremely rare and dangerous lung diseases among your population. This is about preventing cancer. This is about having good jobs. This is about having health, as I said. How can health be a luxury topic? Health is the most important thing in your life. How can that be a luxury topic? So it's just making sure that everyone understands that environment, protection of environment, sustainability, and investing into green energy in general, but I would say renewables, is not separate from your everyday life, your health, and simply where you want your kids to grow and how you want them to live in the future. It's not an easy job. For too many years in our country, when we spoke about the environment, no one was really interested to hear. It was, for so many, a boring topic, as you said, a luxury topic. But growingly, people are understanding that this is about their health. Health is never a luxury topic. It's It's the most important thing in your life. So this is investing in the most important thing in people's lives. And that is the job of politicians, to make sure that we make the right decisions for their lives. And this is that decision. So I guess it will just require not giving up and trying every single day. And I'm sure that these efforts will go from strength to strength, and eventually they will be successful.
You talked in your opening about problems with out-of-passports. Unfortunately, we all have passports, which creates borders and boundaries. And I think, to your point, what I want to really take away from this is, as we think about not giving up, as we think about the future, as we think about these next steps, how do we create solutions without passports, right? How do we think about that physically, digitally, technologically, spiritually, as we think to that? Your leadership here has been just incredible. Thank you for what you're doing in Kosovo. Thank you for what you're doing all around the world. We have a special, for those of you that have ever been in the diplomatic corps, when you're an ambassador, there's special milestones